Hey, what's up everybody? It's Izzy from PowerliftingToWin, and in today's video we're going to talk about the very well-known program, the Texas Method. First of all, I do want to clarify one point. The Texas Method is more of a template than a cookie-cutter program. With that said, with all the different moving parts, I cannot analyze every single version of the Texas Method. So I'm going to focus on the one that has become the most popular across the internet. However, please do note that Practical Programming 3rd edition spends more than 100 pages talking about possible variations of the Texas Method for a variety of different goals, including MMA, weightlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, football, and yes, powerlifting as well. The book discusses how to progress, when to move to the next phase of the Texas Method, how to incorporate dynamic effort and maximal effort method into the program, and a whole lot more. The bottom line is that if you're interested in doing the Texas Method, Practical Programming 3rd edition is must-read material for you. You're absolutely not going to get the best gains possible if you don't snag a copy of Practical Programming and give the whole entire intermediate section a good read. As far as I know, Glenn Penley, the Olympic weightlifting coach, was the first person to talk about the Texas Method online. As legend has it, the Texas Method was actually born by accident. So, Glenn Penley, in coaching his weightlifting team out of Mark Ripeto's gym, the Wichita Falls Athletic Club, had a template where his lifters were working up to 5 sets of 5 on the squat on both Monday and Friday. On one hot Texas afternoon, one of those lifters was grumbling, complaining, and moaning about doing another 5x5 workout on Friday. He wanted to probably go out and do something that night, who knows. So Glenn offered him a challenge on the spot. He said, if you can get a PR set of 5 here, you only have to do 1 set. Well, the lifter was definitely down for that, and so he psyched himself up, smashed the PR, and unwittingly gave birth to the Texas Method. The new template used by Penley now called for a PR set of 5 on Fridays. Now, while Glenn Penley was the first person to popularize this program on the internet, it was really Mark Ripeto who brought the program into legitimate publication. It was first written about in his book, Practical Programming. Now, due to the enormous popularity and success of his novice program, Starting Strength, most trainees who used that program were inclined to also use the intermediate program that Ripeto was recommending. And that's really when the Texas Method took off. This all said, it's important to remember that the Texas Method was primarily birthed in the training of Olympic weightlifters and general strength athletes. Those were Rip's and Glenn's main clients at the time. Even though the Texas Method is more of a template and we're only discussing one version here, the bottom line is that almost all versions of the template tend to include power cleans and a really high ratio of squat to deadlift volume. Now, this is for 2 reasons. The first reason is that Rip does not believe in doing volume deadlifts. He thinks the deadlifts are too hard to recover from. And the other reason is that this program is not explicitly aimed at powerlifters trying to improve their competitive total. It is a general strength template. Unlike, say, Mad Cows, the Texas Method is brutally simplistic. Let's take a look.
Alright guys, let's take a look at what we got going on here with the Texas Method. So you'll notice on Monday that you're doing 5x5 on the squat and the bench or the press, and you're also doing a bunch of power cleans. Wednesday, there's a reduced volume and reduced weight, and you're only going to be doing 2x5 on the squat and a 3x5 of the opposite pressing movement that you did on Monday. So if you benched on Monday, in week 1 you'd press on Wednesday, and if you press on Monday in week 2, you bench on Wednesday. Now on Friday, you go ahead and go for PRs on all the big movements, and each week you alternate the press and the bench. Without delving too much into the specific programming, the idea behind the Texas Method is that Monday serves as the volume stimulus, aka volume day. Wednesday is a lighter day which prevents detraining but allows for more recovery, aka recovery day. And by Friday, you should be fully recovered and ready to smash some new PRs on Intensity Day. So you can see each week you're supposed to go through a full, complete stress recovery adaptation cycle. Monday being the stress, Wednesday being the recovery, and on Friday you demonstrate that adaptation by going for the PR. You're not supposed to accumulate fatigue on the Texas Method in the way that you do on Mad Cows. You're not supposed to stall. The program is intended to be run in the long term, week after week. So as you guys can see, the progression method on the Texas method is really pretty simple. You just add 5 pounds per week to your Friday workout, and then you calculate your Monday and Wednesday weights based off of what you're planning to do that Friday. So here you can see a full month-long example here. We got 300 for 5 on Friday, the next week it goes to 305, then 310, then you get the big milestone of 3 plates and you nail that 315. And you can see that Monday stays at 80 to 90% of Friday, and Wednesday stays at 80 to 90% of Monday. Real simple stuff. You just add 5 pounds per week.
Now, while the Texas method wasn't explicitly aimed at powerlifters, given the structure of the program, it's incredibly easy to adapt the program to a competitive powerlifter's meet schedule. Because the Texas method assumes that you're recovering at the end of each week, if you really wanted to, all you would have to do is skip your Friday workout and compete on Saturday. Now, in my opinion, it's prudent to go ahead and take a light week before you compete anyways, just because even though theoretically you're not supposed to accumulate fatigue on the Texas method, you usually end up doing that anyways. Here's what I would have you do if I was peaking you for a meet using the Texas method.
Alright guys, here's how I would peak using the Texas method. All you really have to do is reduce volume day on meet week to 3x5 and deload it about 10%. So you can see here using the 405 example, I just dropped it down to 365 to remove about 10%, and you drop 2 sets, which is going to allow for some major recovery. Additionally, the Wednesday light day becomes a little bit lighter too because it stays at 80-90% of Monday. And then on Friday, you rest instead of doing a workout, and you compete at the meet on Saturday. So in this way, it's just a real simple peak that allows some fatigue to dissipate during that final meet week. And it's going to let you perform a little better at the meet.
In terms of periodization, the Texas method does not employ different periods where you're focusing on hypertrophy, strength, technique, the squat, the bench, the deadlift. In fact, the Texas method doesn't even vary volume from week to week. It's a true blue intermediate program. The overall programmatic structure of the Texas method is devastatingly effective and brutally simple. It's one of the strongest aspects of the program. Now, compared to traditional block periodization programs that are designed for more advanced lifters, instead of spending a few weeks accumulating high volume, then recovering and deloading, followed by a period of intensification where you go for PRs, the Texas method squeezes this whole process inside of 1 week to reflect the fact that an intermediate can go through the stress adaptation recovery cycle a lot faster than an advanced athlete. So what you end up having is Monday is volume day, Wednesday is recovery day, and Friday is intensity day. So the entire training week represents a full mesocycle, and each training session within that mesocycle is a particular microcycle with a designated goal that we just talked about. Now, this variation from workout to workout in volume is absolutely perfect for the intermediate trainee. In my opinion, the Texas method is going to be one of the intermediate programs that results in the fastest progress because of the way that it's set up. It's ideal for the early intermediate. One of the biggest failings of the Texas method is in specificity. Now, here's the thing. As we've talked about in other program reviews, there's just no reason for a powerlifter to ever do the press and the bench in a 1-to-1 ratio. It just doesn't make sense. The bench press is a competitive lift, and the overhead press is not. Additionally, if you look at the squatting versus pulling volume on the program, each week you're doing 40 reps of squats and 20 reps of pulls. And the thing is that 15 of those pulls are power cleans. Only 5 deadlift reps are done the entire week. You're literally doing 8 times more squatting than you are deadlifting. And that's just not optimal for a power lifter. Realistically, you don't need to be doing power cleans at all. In powerlifting, despite the name, it doesn't really matter what your rate of force production is. As long as you finish the lift, it counts. So if you finish it in 3 seconds versus 5 seconds, it makes no difference whatsoever. As is the case with all PTW programs, the upper body volume for some reason is less than the lower body volume on this program. You only do 45 reps on the upper body throughout the entire week. On the lower body, you're going to do 60, and it's more like 90 to 105 if you include the GHRs and back extensions on Wednesday as lower body movements. If anything, this is backwards. Most people need more upper body volume to achieve the same levels of fatigue than they do for their lower body. Now, I can already hear you guys saying, these issues are really easy to fix. All you have to do is only press on Wednesdays, bench on both Monday and Friday, reduce the squat volume a little bit, change the power cleans to a more specific assistance exercise like deficits or stiff legs, and then you've basically just fixed the issues that I talked about. Well, yeah, you have a good point, and that's why I brought up at the very beginning of the video that the Texas method is more of a template than a cookie cutter program. However, at the same time, that is not the program. Those are smart adjustments to make, but it's not the way the program was written. So I'm evaluating the program as is, not with intelligent changes made. If you do want some example of how to make intelligent changes like this, again, I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Practical Programming 3rd Edition, because it's going to give you variations that are more specific to powerlifting than the generic template that everybody uses on the internet. Now, eventually, I'm going to release the Powerlifting to Win Intermediate program, and when I do, you're going to see that I drew on a lot of the elements of the Texas method to construct the overall programmatic foundation. However, that said, I'm going to make some pretty significant changes, and it just goes beyond the scope of this video for me to talk about it. If you're interested in seeing the Powerlifting to Win Intermediate program, just go ahead and keep following along in the series. It's coming eventually. As far as overload, Texas method uses the most simple overload method that there is, and that's just progressive overload. Every week you add 5 pounds more to the bar than you did last week, and that's perfectly appropriate for the intermediate trainee. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of fatigue management, I think that the Texas method is spot on. Rather than like the more advanced programs that we talked about, which spend a few weeks in each phase in terms of accumulation, recovery and deload, and then intensification, again, you do the whole thing in 1 week in the Texas method. And for an intermediate trainee, that's ideal because you're getting the maximum amount of stress, recovery, adaptation cycles that you can in a given amount of training weeks. So in my opinion, the Texas method is going to result in the optimal rate of progress for early intermediate lifters. Like most programs, the Texas method almost completely ignores individual differences. If you pick up a copy of Practical Programming 3rd Edition, in the book it talks about certain individual scenarios where you should use 3x5 on volume day, and it also talks about how different rates of progress are appropriate for different demographics. This is nice because at least some attempt is made to address individual differences. However, overall, the Texas method pretty much just ignores individual differences. This is just suboptimal for an intermediate trainee. Look, everybody has bad days and everybody has good days. Your program needs to allow you to take advantage of that fact. On the Texas method, if you have a bad day, you have no recourse besides to just try the weight again next week or reset completely. This can be a way to derail progress even though you just had a bad day. The reality of training is that everybody needs different levels of volume and everybody makes progress at different rates. Not only that, but everybody needs different levels of volume and progresses at different rates from a week-to-week basis. So the problem with the Texas method is that everything is 100% predetermined. You're doing a predetermined amount of volume, you're doing a predetermined amount of reps, and there's just no way for you to go outside of that structure to individualize the program for you personally. In the Powerlifting to Win Intermediate program, I'm going to show you how I would incorporate auto-regulation into the Texas method to make it a better program. If you want a sneak peek at what that might look like, visit the Powerlifting to Win forums and check out the thread by the user Dan Lee in the Powerlifting discussion forums. He's posted his template combining reactive training system methods with the Texas method for anyone to use if they want. Overall, I think there are aspects of the Texas method that are unsurpassed by other intermediate programs. Namely, the overall programmatic structure is going to maximize your rate of progress as an intermediate trainee. In my opinion, the way that the microcycles are set up with a volume day, a recovery day, and an intensity day are 100% ideal for the early intermediate trainee. The other thing is that this program can be run in the long term. With only a few adjustments and resets along the way, you can feasibly run the Texas method for a full year or two. And I'm always a proponent of using a program for long-term consistent progress rather than using programs for short-term boosts. Additionally, the program is really easy to adapt to a meet schedule. So if you want to compete, the Texas method isn't going to be a program that stops you from doing that. You can run it in the off-season and the on-season. The program does need to be adjusted for specificity to powerlifting. You shouldn't have the 1-to-1 press to bench ratio. You shouldn't be doing power cleans. There's not enough deadlifting and just a bit too much squatting. And overall, the program just doesn't account for individual differences at all. If you'd like to get a head start on how to adjust the Texas method to address these deficiencies, I highly recommend that you check out my review of Mike Teixeira's reactive training systems, that you pick up a copy of the Practical Programming 3rd edition, and that you go ahead and head to the PowerliftingToWin.com forums and go to the discussion thread where we're already talking about how to use RTS with the Texas method. In conclusion, the Texas method is a really solid intermediate program, but as a powerlifter, you need to be prepared to make some adjustments to it. And when I release the Powerlifting to Win intermediate program, I'm going to show you specifically how I would do it. Next up on our list of programs to review is going to be Jim Wendler's iconic 5-3-1 program. Now, I do have to say that I am not really a fan of 5-3-1, and then in the next video, I'll be explaining why I don't like it for powerlifting. Before I close this up, again, I can't emphasize enough that if you're interested in doing the Texas method, do yourself the favor of getting Practical Programming 3rd edition. The book has over 100 pages of discussion about this program alone. It talks about when to move to the next phase of the Texas method. It talks about different progression ideas. There's different templates, including an upper-lower split. The book offers you so many different ways to actually employ the program, and it's going to expand your knowledge base about intermediate programming exponentially. I highly recommend that you grab a copy of Practical Programming 3rd edition if you're interested in the Texas method. If you guys have any questions or comments, head to the Powerlifting to Win forums at www.powerliftingtowin.com/forums. And if you found this content interesting, informative, or entertaining, please do me the favor of liking it, sharing it, and sending it out into the interwebs for me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out powerliftingtowin.com for more great powerlifting information. Have a nice day.